Now let's create a MySQL database. And so we're going to be doing this in AWS using RDS. So you can go to the AWS console and then to RDS, and we can click on DB instances to be able to create a new one. We can click on Create Database, and we want to create a MySQL database. To keep the cost reasonable, let's only do ones that are eligible for the free tier. Then we want to make sure that we do a MySQL 5.7. And so this will be on a T2 micro. We can then name our database instance identifier. I will use Prisma demo. And then we can have a master username and password. So in this case, I'll just use code mochi, but obviously you'd use something more secure for yours. We're going to use a default VPC and then make sure that it's publicly available. This part's really important. If it's private, you're not going to be able to access it from your local development machine. We can then create a database name. So in this case, we'll call it Prisma, and we will use port 3306. I'm not really interested in doing any database backups, so I'm going to set this to 0, which will basically turn it off. So then I have to create a database. And then we can now click on the View Database Instance Details, and we can just wait for this to finish. This will probably be about 10 minutes, so you can go grab a cup of coffee and come back when it's done. You'll know that it's done when this endpoint gets filled in. So this is now coming back about 10 minutes later, and we can see that it has an endpoint here. And we're going to create a new Prisma project. But this time we're going to select MySQL instead of SQLite. So we type Prisma2 init MySQL demo. Now we're going to select MySQL. Now we can just copy in the details. So for host, it will be this endpoint that's here. We can paste that in. The port's going to be 3306, and then our user is going to be code mochi, and our password is code mochi. You want to make sure you don't enable SSL, and you can just say connect. Now it will show you all the different tables, and so Prisma is the one that we want to go with, or Prisma is the database that we want to go with. And so now it's all done. You'll notice that kind of the user flow for MySQL is different than SQLite. And that's because it doesn't actually create a project along with it like it does in the case of SQLite. So now we can navigate to the folder and open it. And we can see that in this case, there's only a single folder with one file that's our project.prisma. So the important part here is this data source block, and we're going to want to kind of copy this and paste it into our MySQL project to be able to connect to it. I copy the data source block, which has a connection string and then also the database type. Now I can go back to the MySQL project. And what I want to do is clear away the files that are related to the SQLite so that I can instead connect to the MySQL. So I can replace this data source with the one that from the MySQL project. And now I want to be able to, and now I want to delete the migrations and also the dev database and the lift lock file. So I can delete the database and the migrations folder. And this basically removes all traces that I use SQLite ever. Now I can go back to the terminal, and I can go back to my SQLite Prisma. And so it's now a MySQL project, but the folder name is obviously what it was before. And I can go Prisma 2 dev. And you can see that there's a little bit of discrepancy. So instead of doing the Prisma lift save and Prisma lift up, I just did the Prisma 2 dev. And the reason for this is because I think it's some kind of bug in the beta as of this version where if you do the save and then up, it has some kind of error when it tries to apply this migration to your MySQL table. So a better approach is just to go Prisma to dev, and it will apply all of those migrations, and it will all work, but it won't produce the error. We can see that the Studio endpoint is up just like we saw before. You can see that when I run Prisma 2 dev, it actually produces an error. And the reason for this is because if we go back to our connection string, we can see that the port number that it's trying to connect is what you would expect for a Postgres database, this 5432, and it's not the right port that you need for a MySQL database. So this is some bug that's currently present in Prisma 2, and I'm sure that they'll fix. So it needs to be 3306 here. So if I update that and then save it and then run Prisma 2 dev again, we can see that now it's working. So it's actually applying this schema and migrating it on the MySQL database, and it looks like everything worked just fine. Now we can go to our Prisma Studio endpoint, and we can see that the posts and users models are totally empty, just like we'd expect. Now we can start our backend server again using npm start. And we can go to localhost :4000. And let's just try a query. So we try the feed query and it succeeds. It says that it's empty, which is correct because we don't have any posts that are published. So let me comment this out and just go through the mutations that I did before, and let's just confirm that they work. The first one that I want to do is this sign up user. I can use my email and name just like before. And this appears to have worked. So I can go check it in the Prisma admin, and we can see that under the user model that there is now a user. We can comment this out now and send a mutation to create draft. This is now my first draft. I'm using the same author email that I used in the create up there. This mutation appears to have worked. So now I'll see a post over here. And what we should see is that under the user, that it has a connection to my user. This looks like it worked. Now we can check out this feed query again. So even though I have a post, it's not published. So if I send this off, it should have no posts come back. But if I change this post from published false to published is true, we can send this to true. We can save that to the database. So now this is updated. And we can now send the same query again. And now it comes back with our published result. So that's it. I've now given you a quick overview of Prisma 2. You've seen how you can create a MySQL demo, which has users and posts, and we've shown how we can add users and posts. We can connect them together using a relationship, and how we can use queries to be able to fetch that data back. You've seen that unlike Prisma 1, with Prisma 2, you don't actually need two servers running at the same time, but that if you want to, and for development purposes, there is a Prisma Studio, which allows us to actually see all of our models and database entries. And we've shown you how you can connect this to both a SQLite database and also a MySQL database that's hosted on RDS, which will be great for production builds.